But the new ones, I mean, they're already ruined. They've got Jar Jar Binks in them, so being in 3D can't make them any worse, right? No, I've actually heard that the 3D in the new ones is actually pretty good because it's not like sort of over-the-top things flying out off the screen at you all the time. That it's more subtle than that, and so it works a lot better. Which I'm kind of curious about, I guess. I wouldn't say excited. I'm mildly curious. I guess if my son wants to go see it, I'll take him. Maybe. Announcements. Remember, no class on Wednesday or Friday of this week, or Monday of next week. So it's like having a spring break in February. But it's like, well, I guess it snowed. I was going to say it's like spring. The weather is, almost. We do have class next Tuesday, though. We do have a quiz scheduled for next Tuesday. I forgot what the quiz is on. The next chapter? Maybe.
I don't remember. I'll look it up.
Okay, we'll figure it out. I'll probably send out an email or something like that. Other things to think about. The exam is, David, graded? Not graded?
Not graded yet.
Not yet graded. Okay, so give us a break. I mean, come on.
I just got a whole bunch of exams and a whole bunch of labs and more quizzes. So.
Oh, right. Okay, so David's a little swamped. But he'll get caught up while we don't have class.
Exactly.
Other announcements? Oh, Women in Science is on the 16th, apparently. Go listen to Dr. Jeff Edwards speak. It's kind of a funny name for a female scientist, but I think it'll be good. No, Dr. Edwards is actually in the neuroscience program. He does some interesting stuff with the hippocampus. Okay, so today, so far when we talked about depth, we've talked about binocular disparity mostly. So calculating the difference between the two images to the two different eyes. But what if you only got one eye? What if you've only got two dimensions to convey depth? So say you're a painter and you want to be able to give depth to your paintings. How do you actually do that? How do you give an illusion of depth when there is none? So we're going to talk about monocular cues and motion cues and motor cues today for perceiving depth. So the problem is, just as sort of a recap, how do we go from the two-dimensional image on the back of our eye to being able to see in 3 dimensions? And so far we've talked about comparing the two different two-dimensional images that we have in the two eyes. And that gets us quite a ways. But if you've only got one eye, if you're a cyclops, for example, do you lose all of your depth perception? Well, you lose some of it, but not necessarily all of it. Particularly for things that are far away, the binocular disparity doesn't actually make that big of a difference. So let's talk about ocular motor cues and then monocular cues, and we've actually already covered binocular cues. So ocular motor cues come from basically feedback from the motor system. So if you want to focus on something that's close up to you, you've got to keep both of your eyes focused on it, right? So you've got to take your eyes and cross them, more or less. So these are cues based on sensing the position of your eyes. And as you converge your eyes and move them closer inwards, then that indicates what? Where is your depth of focus?
Say that one more time.
So you're watching your finger, right? And your finger comes closer. What do you have to do with your eyes?
Adjust the focus of the lens.
Adjust the focus of the lenses, but also to keep both eyes entrained on your finger as it comes closer? You cross them. You go cross-eyed. So that's called convergence, converging your eyes. So as things get closer, you converge your eyes on them, up to a point. So there's a point at which you can't converge your eyes anymore. It's just not physically possible. So convergence and divergence are the inward and outward motions of your eyes. So to converge means to come together or go cross-eyed. So we cross our eyes when we focus on nearby objects. And then accommodation is what you talked about, is changing the shape of your lens.
Can some people converge better than others, or is it kind of across the board average?
Yes, some people can do it better than others. Some people can converge one eye and leave the other eye pointing straight. It's kind of creepy. My son can do this. But yeah, so this is the basic idea, that some people can go cross-eyed, others can't. So you can do it just like anything else. There's variations, right? There's just natural variation. So some people are better at this or can go farther than other people. But there are limits. You can't, continue swiveling your eyes into the back of your head, right? So so this is convergence. Divergence is where you take your eyes and basically you're not going to diverge past parallel, right? So it doesn't do you any good to have one eye pointing this direction, one eye pointing this direction. You want to keep them straight. So they're either pointing parallel to one another or they're converging. But that motion of going out is called divergence. Accommodation is the stretching of the lens, right? So for things that are closer, you want your lens to be thicker. For things that are farther away, you want your lens to be thinner. So accommodation is when you go from being thin and sort of relaxed to thicker. This actually requires some changing of the shape of the lens, and as you get older, it's harder to change that shape. It's harder to make it thicker, and so your eyesight gets worse for things that are closer as you get older. All right, so convergence is pretty effective for things that are up to maybe yay far away or so. So these ocular motor cues work up to a certain distance, but once you get past, say, arm's length really, then you've diverged completely and your eyes are parallel to one another. So for things that are really close, like right on your nose, then convergence works. But for things that are farther away, you need something better, where your eyes are completely diverged. So you need to have some other kind of cues. Oh yeah. So size and distance sort of play off of one another. And I've shown you a bunch of pictures like this so far, where we try and figure out, okay, so does relative height mean anything? Can we use that as a cue to distance? Or maybe the height in the picture plane, things like that. So these are all monocular cues or pictorial cues. So monocular cues are cues that you can get if your eyes are completely diverged, so you don't have any ocular motor cues, and or if you close one eye. So if you close one eye and you're not using this one, or if you lose one eye, then does convergence work? No, because it requires two eyes to converge the two eyes. So what if you've only got one eye? What can you pick up on? You can pick up on both pictorial and motion cues. So I'll show you a bunch of pictorial cues and a couple of examples of motion cues. So I've got a list, including familiar size, which is that we can figure out the distance that we are from something based on how familiar we are with the size of that object. So a person is about person height. So if the person appears tiny, then you know that that person is far away. It's not likely that it's a tiny person, because you haven't run across very many of those. These are out of order. We'll go through each of these things, actually. So atmospheric perspective is that objects in the distance tend to get fuzzy or hazy. Texture grading is that you can see more items closer up. So equally spaced elements are more closely packed as distance increases. Shadows indicate how far things are off the ground, for example, where objects are located. Occlusion tells you what's in front of what. Relative height, objects that are higher in the field of vision are more distant. Relative size, if two things are the same size but one appears to be smaller than the other, then it's farther away. And then perspective convergence is that parallel lines converge in the distance. Let me show you examples of all of these things, so don't worry if you haven't got them down. So which one is closest? The dime. Why? Because the dime is smallest, they all appear to be the same size, and so therefore the dime has to be closest. Either that or it's a ginormous dime. How many ginormous dimes have you seen that are the size of a quarter? Not many. And so relative or familiar size can tell you how far away things are. Is it a very powerful cue? Does the dime actually appear to be closer than the quarter? No, it just looks like I've taken a picture of a dime and blown it up to be the size of a quarter, right? So does this work as a visual illusion? Not really, does it? So even if, I don't think that it works. So, is this a very powerful cue? No, you can sort of figure it out, right? And if you look at these, okay, I know that that's a quarter, I know that's a nickel, I know that's a dime, I know dimes are smaller than quarters, so therefore that one has to be closer, right? So it takes several mental steps in order to get at it. If it were a very powerful cue, it would be instantly obvious, right? That, oh, that one's closer because it's smaller. But we have to kind of think about it. So it's not necessarily a very powerful cue. Here's another example of familiar size. Actually, we're sort of manipulating a couple of things here. So are these two people the same height? Probably. You would assume that they are. You would not assume that they're like that, right? So that looks funny. So what have we done here that we didn't do with the last one? Yeah, we've altered the height in the picture plane. So how high up this person is relative to that person. So if this person is higher up, and we've got all of this distance between them, we assume this distance is receding into the distance, or this difference is a difference in distance. Whereas if they're both right here, then we assume, oh, they're the same distance away, so therefore this person is much smaller than that person. So familiar size doesn't actually give us all of that much. We are familiar with how tall people are, but if you manipulate something like this, like height in the picture plane, then all of a sudden that makes a big difference, and it makes this look really weird. So familiar size can work. We can use that to figure out distance, but it's not the most powerful cue that we have. Atmospheric perspective is basically that there's haze in the atmosphere, or there's water vapor in the atmosphere is what it is. So how would you describe, this is a better example, how would you describe the mountains that are farther away relative to the mountains that are closer? They're bluish, yeah. So as you get farther away, so this one that's right next to you, sort of green, kind of green still, but as you get farther away, you get more and more blue going on until you get all the way over here, and there's obviously some sort of haze going on in that valley.
This might be a dumb question, but do your rods activate more when you're looking for like distance things because they respond better to blue light?
That's not a dumb question. That's a good question. What do you guys think?
Yeah, because it's actually blue light, so they'll pick up on that more than if haze were red.
Right, yeah. So insofar as they're going to respond during bright light conditions, during photopic vision, yes, they are going to respond more because they're maximally sensitive to blue. But yeah, Josh is right that if haze happened to be red, then they wouldn't respond. So it's just a property of the wavelengths to which they're maximally sensitive. It's not a property of distance per se. All right, so that's texture gradient. Distant objects are fuzzy and have a blue tint to them.
Atmospheric perspective?
Sorry. Yeah, atmospheric perspective. This is texture gradient. I'm getting ahead of myself. Texture gradient is, so say you're looking at this carpet, for example. So the carpet has a pretty uniform pattern, but the uniformity of the pattern changes as it goes away, right? So the farther you get into the distance, the more crowded the pattern becomes. So if you're looking at a tile floor, the tiles up close look like they're farther away, and as you get farther, they look like they're more spaced. As you get farther away, the spacing gets less and less and less. Or another way of saying it is that you've got more texture closer up. So you can see all the details for the peasants having lunch here. These guys back here, not a lot of detail. And then if you look at, other direction. If you look at like the individual, you can sort of pick out individual, what is this? Wheat? Stalks of wheat? But then as you get farther away, you can't. There's not that individual differences. So if you're looking at wildebeests, you can see the individual wildebeest, you can see the details up close, but as you get farther away, there's less detail and they look like they're closer together. Their images are closer together. Anything anything else I want to say about this? No. This is kind of a cool effect. So what have I done here? So I've just switched the shadows, right? I haven't changed anything about the balls. They're in exactly the same place in the two images. But I have manipulated where the shadows are. Where the shadows are here, what does this look like? Where are the balls located? They're floating in the air, right. But here, where the shadows are right next to them, they look like they're sitting right on the board. So if you do something like this, you can levitate. So if you just manipulate where your shadow is, then it looks like you're floating. Also a good example. So shadows don't necessarily convey distance, right? So they don't necessarily tell you, oh, this one in the... Where'd my thing go? Sometimes I hate this pointer. As I shine it in my eye. So this one is farther away, right? But are the shadows telling you that that one is farthest away?
I would say yes, comparing these two.
Okay.
Not in every case, but like
In
in this case.
this case?
Because like in B, you can see the shadows are in a straight line.
Okay.
They're on the same plane this way. Whereas in A, they look like they're on the fraction.
Okay. And manipulating the shadows gives you that information. Okay.
Also, they're all relatively equal in size, and if it was a greater distance, having some size disparity, and just moving the shadows in B, if the further rightmost ball happened to be smaller looking, you might still be getting that image that it's further away.
Okay, yeah. So in order for this to work, we've manipulated a couple of things, or we've kept a couple of things constant, right? So the size of the balls has to be constant because here, for this to work, they've got to be the same size for you to interpret that they're all in the same plane, and it's just this one is literally higher off of the ground than this one is. But here, it's higher in the image because it's farther back. So we've manipulated a couple of things, and the shadows have allowed us to do that. So here, the shadows indicate that it's the height in the picture plane, so that it's going farther back, and therefore it looks higher. But here, it's higher because it is literally higher. Its elevation is higher. Does that make sense? So shadows tell you this distance between the object and whatever it's casting the shadow against, and not necessarily, and that gives you another clue as to how far away it is, but not necessarily, the shadows don't necessarily tell you distance per se, distance from you, the observer. So does everybody get how this one works? It's just a wet patch on the pavement. What if it were a bright, sunshiny day? Would this work? So I'm guessing that it's overcast when they took this picture, that it was overcast when they took this picture. Because he doesn't have a shadow, right? If he had a direct shadow, then this would fall apart, and you'd be able to see that, oh, that's just a wet patch on the pavement. Why does this one work?
The shadows reflecting off the bottom of the...
Right, so this is the shadow on the sand, right? So underneath the water, and the water is really clear. So if the water were less clear, or if the water were deeper, then it wouldn't work at all. So it's dependent on both of those factors. All right, occlusion. Occlusion is where something gets in the way, right? So who's the closest here? Yeah, the dude in the toga on the right. So the guy in the back, how can you tell that he's in the back? This guy? Because he's occluded, right. So you can't see him. So do my legs disappear when I walk behind the lectern? No. So it just means that I'm farther away than the lectern is, and the lectern occludes my legs. You can manipulate occlusion to give conflicting information. So this bizarre Necker cube sort of thing manipulates occlusion here, where you expect this upright to be occluded by this, but it's not, and so it looks weird. How does occlusion play into the Kaniji triangles?
Technically, it doesn't,
Okay.
because we're creating the image that's not there. But if there was an image there that we're seeing, it's in the way of the other two.
Right, so we're interpreting it as occlusion. So we're interpreting it as there's this triangle that's occluding everything else. And that the reason that we can't see the line that's connecting those two angles is because of the occluding illusory triangle, right? So occlusion, powerful cue, not a powerful cue? It is actually pretty powerful. It makes this look really weird. It makes this perceivable at all, right? That we can actually perceive that is a testament to how powerful occlusion is. Height in the picture plane, or relative height. This is not a great example of relative height. This is a better example. And it demonstrates two things, actually. So the general idea is that the higher up in the picture plane something is, the farther away it is. Till you get to the horizon. And then above the horizon, it's the opposite. So basically, it's the closer it is to the horizon, to your horizon line in the picture, the farther away it is. Because if you look at this building, where you can see the corner of the building, the higher up it is, the closer it is, right? So this up here, closer than this down here. So it's higher in the picture plane, but it's closer because it's farther away from the horizon. These folks are closer than these folks back here, and that's indicated by their distance to the horizon, or their height in the picture plane. Perspective convergence is that parallel lines tend to converge in the distance. We're really moving through these things very quickly. Does anybody have any questions about this stuff? Pretty straightforward? Okay, well, I think we're going to get out early today. Not that you guys are upset about that, right? All right, perspective convergence is parallel lines tend to converge in the distance. This is a really powerful cue. So remember the Ponzo illusion from last week? Did we talk about the Ponzo illusion? So if I were to put two equally sized boxes over the image on the right, then you wouldn't be able to tell. It would look like one is much larger than the other one, because this perspective convergence really is quite a powerful cue. So parallel lines tend to converge in the distance, and so if you want to convey distance, imply that the lines are parallel, like in the case of the train tracks, and then have them actually come together. See?
In the last picture, the one you used for height in the picture plane, it almost seems like it's it looks like it's the opposite, unless it's a really funny shaped building. Actually, it's a really funny shaped building. Never mind.
Yeah, so it's not a square building, and that has something to do with it. But, I mean, it also takes advantage of this convergence, right? So here, if you measure the absolute distance here, it's farther than the distance here between the same two lines, right? So they tend to converge off in the distance at the horizon line, right? So you've got some point of convergence. But also, it is a funny shaped building. So that's playing into how weird it looks.
Is there some sort of cue that offsets this one, not linear perspective, but the height in the picture plane? Because, I mean, there's the lamppost. It's really high and really low, but it's not like it's going far away and then coming back out.
Right.
Is that just because, is that a familiar size thing? Or
What do you guys think? What's going on with the lamppost?
I think a lot of it depends on where, not so much like the height of the whole thing, but the height of the base of it. So, like, even with the building, if you look at the closer part, if you drew a straight line, the back of the building would still be on a higher plane than the front of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same with the lamppost. Like, you can tell it's a reflection because it gets all hazy. So, like, you can kind of see where the base is and that it's closer.
Yeah, and so there is some familiarity there because we know that things tend to sit on the ground, right? They don't float in midair unless they have a shadow that indicates that they're floating in midair. And so, yeah, so we know where the base is, and so off of the base, based on the base, we can figure out how high it is actually in the picture plane. So how high are your feet in the picture plane might be a better way of putting that. Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's the other way. All right. So that's it for pictorial cues. What about motion cues? Do we ever use motion to figure out distance? Actually, yes, we do it all the time. The idea is that the closer something is, the more it's going to appear to move relative to things that are farther away. That's called motion parallax. Objects that are closer than the fixation point will tend to move backward relative to a moving observer, and objects that are farther away from the fixation point will move along with the observer. So let me show you an example. This is not a good example of that last point. This is a good example of motion parallax, though. So the idea is that the closer something is, the more it appears to move. So which box is the closest? Is that white? Light blue? That one, right? Which box is the farthest? The green one. Okay. So in addition to motion, what else is going on here? Occlusion, right, yeah. So the first thing that's going on is called motion parallax. Things that are closer appear to move more faster than things that are farther away. So if you're driving along in the car, the stuff at the side of the road looks like it's moving very fast. The mountains in the distance don't look like they're moving at all. And then the moon looks like it's following you. It looks like it's moving along with you. Because you don't have any reference points for the moon. So one eye moving from left to right. So if we have this one eye moving from left to right, the image of the tree is going to move more than the image of the house on the retina. So both of those things are on the retina. And then you've got this occlusion, which plays into accretion and deletion. So deletion is that things will, so if the observer moves to the left, then you're going to get a deletion of the thing behind it. If you move to the right, then you see more of the thing behind it. So you get more or less occlusion, basically, is the idea between accretion and deletion. All right, so when do we actually use these things? With accommodation, you're using it actually really close up, but for things that are farther away, you tend not to use them. Same thing with convergence. So from 0 to about 2 meters out, you're going to use these ocular motor cues. Other things that you use close up include occlusion, relative size, familiar size, shadows, motion parallax, accretion, deletion, all of those things work close up. Occlusion actually works at any distance. So things that are closer are always going to appear in front of things that are farther away. Same thing with relative size. So if you've got two things, two people that you are guessing about the same size, if they appear different sizes, then you know that one's closer than the other one. Relative height doesn't work close up, it only works at greater distances. Same thing with perspective convergence. That's linear parallel lines converge in the distance. Familiar size, insofar as it works, it's not a really great cue. It works at all distances. Atmospheric perspective isn't going to work at medium distances, right? Because you have to have enough distance for things to appear hazy. Texture gradient works at medium to long distances. Shadows work at all distances. Motion parallax doesn't necessarily. Why would motion parallax not work at great distances? Because everything appears like it's not moving at all, right? So the mountains and the moon, well, they're eventually going to appear like they're moving relative to one another, but not at any pace like what you're walking.
Oh, just kidding. I was reading occlusion as convergence.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't make sense that it only works for 2 meters.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, you got to stay on the same lines. All right. So we're going to get out way early today. Does anybody have a problem with that? Would anybody like to go on to talk about something else, or are you okay getting out early? All right, so let me introduce the second lab assignment, which has to do with these cues that we were talking about today. So the assignment is to go to the Museum of Art here on campus and go down to the basement to the Wide Open Spaces exhibit. Now, Wide Open Spaces, so what, do you happen to know the due date for the, it's like March 12th or something like that. So this exhibit is set to go away. They're going to take it down on the due date of this assignment. So you have to do it on time. March 9th. Okay. So you have to do this assignment before the due date. Otherwise, it'll be impossible to do. Because they're taking away this exhibit, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do next semester when I teach this again. So the point is to go to the MOA and find examples of each of the monocular cues. Well, no, I take that back. Each of the pictorial cues that we discussed. So you're not going to find any examples of motion parallax, for example. But you are going to find examples of all of the stuff that we talked about. Atmospheric perspective, linear convergence, etc., etc. All of that stuff is present there. And what we want you to do is write a description of the painting and the cue that they use. For example, say you go, you can't choose this one because I'm already giving you the punchline for this one. So this is an example of linear convergence or perspective convergence. So this painting is called Nowhere to Go. It's by Maynard Dixon. And this is basically what we're looking for. It's just a sort of one paragraph summary. Actually, we're looking for a little bit more. So with this one, I take that back. Let me start over again. We are looking for a description of the painting. So if you want to include the picture of the painting in your summary, then we can see exactly what you're talking about. If you don't want to include that, if you just want to describe the picture, then that's fine. But we need to be able to, based on your sheet, without going to the MOA, figure out what you're talking about. Now, if we have to go to the MOA to grade this, that's not the worst thing in the world. In fact, this is my favorite assignment to grade because I just go to the MOA and I hang out in the basement. There's actually this reading room where nobody goes. It's great.
But this will be down by the time they're being graded.
Oh yeah, there is that. I'm still going to the MOA. Because I get to go to the MOA like once a year when I give this assignment. So at any rate, we want a description of the painting. So a description of the painting is actually going to be critical because we're not going to be able to go to the MOA and take a look at it anymore. If you want JPEGs of all of these images, you can actually download them from the MOA website. So I shouldn't have told you that. Because now you're not going to go to the MOA to find these things. Actually, the names of the paintings are not on the description, so you have to sort of scroll through these things. So in order to actually do this example, do this assignment, you do have to go to the MOA. At any rate, what we want you to do is describe how, as in this example, how Dixon uses linear convergence. We want to know that you understand linear convergence. So include a statement such as linear convergence is when parallel lines appear to converge in the distance. So some summary of this phenomenon, of this cue, so that we know that you know what you're talking about. And then in this specific example, we assume that the fence rails are parallel, but since they appear to converge in the distance, it gives the feeling of depth.
Do you want us to do a different painting for each theme?
Yes.
Okay.
I want a different painting for
And we
each
can
thing.
only use
Because like we were talking about, I can't remember what it's called, the form of the ring. It's got, texture gradient, it's got lines converging.
Right, yeah, yeah. So for this one, you could do heighten the picture plane as well. So if you wanted to use this painting for heighten the picture plane, you could. I'm saying that you can't use it for linear convergence. If you wanted to use a painting like this, so you find a different painting that has both linear convergence and heighten the picture plane, and familiar size, so we know about how high this fence is based on how tall the person is. I'm saying don't do that. So pick one. So pick a different painting for each different thing. Give you a broader exposure to different paintings in the MoMA. Fun facts about Maynard Dixon. His studio, he lived in Carmel Junction down in southern Utah. He was married to, I always forget her name, Dorothea Lange, is that right? Am I making that up? A photographer.
Sounds
Yeah. They had the exhibit 3 Utah towns of her photos. I'm thinking it's Dorothea Lange.
right. I think it's right.
Yeah. What else do I know about Maynard? That's all I know about Maynard Dixon. If you drive down to Kanab, you'll pass his house and museum and stuff there. All right, any questions about this? Okay, it's not due for a while, but you don't have class for the rest of the week, so you might as well do it now, right? Instead of coming to class. That's all I'm saying. All right, that's all I've got today. Any questions about depth, 3D, distance, size? All right, cool. Have a good break. Remember that we have class on Tuesday, but not Wednesday, Friday, or Monday.